From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. Of course, it is the season of The Witch, or something like that. So we've been talking a lot of horror movies lately, and that's going to keep on going. With me, as always, is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. He's probably pissed off because we were supposed to record this on the way down to SmackDown, but I didn't know how to work my phone right, so that got screwed up. So you can blame John for that. But his name's Sean. Sean, how are you doing?
We were going to have such a great time at SmackDown. We're going to be shooting smack at SmackDown. We're going to have such a good time at SmackDown, but alas.
We're not even a minute into this episode, and we're already halfway off the rails.
Halfway?
Yeah, halfway. So
what else is new?
Not much. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm all right.
Yeah.
Moving along with the plans for the surgery. So,
yeah,
got that. That's moving. I don't have a date, but, talking about it.
Well, I guess you got to talk about it before talk it, then, be it, man. Right?
Yeah. Talk the talk to walk the walk, or something along those lines.
If it makes you feel better, I screwed up my back yesterday carrying trash out of my basement.
Nice. Yeah, that does make me feel better.
Empathy pain or something like that.
Empathy, sympathy.
Yeah.
Any kind of pain. That's cool. I'm good with that.
Well, it's been a rough day, but I'm surviving. I'm going an opposite route. Instead of professional medication, I'm doing the self-medication route. So
yeah, sometimes it's almost better that way.
Well, if it's still bad after a couple of days, maybe we'll think about something more professional. But for a day, I think I can handle with the self-induced pharmacology.
Yeah, we'll see if it springs back.
Right. What have you been watching this week?
I'm keeping up. Since we didn't get to SmackDown or to SmackDown, I did watch the WWE biography of Edge, which I think I was thinking about this when in 20 years I'm not going to be able to watch these because I'm not going to know who any of these wrestlers are because I stopped watching wrestling around, 2000. So Edge is almost even too new for me. He's I think he started in 96 or something professionally. And that was about towards the end of when I was watching it. They keep putting these people in the Hall of Fame. I don't know who I'm going to keep watching. But watched the next episode of Dark Side of Comedy on Vice, which this week was Andrew Dice Clay. I actually just watched that today.
What's your opinion on the Dice Man?
I think we
talked about him before, haven't we?
I don't think so.
I don't think we did.
We may have.
I think he was on a show that I was watching.
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar. I wasn't really a fan of the comedy at the time when it was on because I was pretty young. I think it was late 80s or so. So I was still pretty young for comedy. I know I had friends that were really into it, but we were 12, and I think that they just were into it because it was he said the bad words or whatever.
Right.
So it was controversial, but other than that, he kind of disappeared. When he disappeared, I really didn't have any real opinion on him either way because I didn't have enough exposure to him.
Yeah, I've never really been a big fan of his comedy from what I've seen. I obviously, when he was big in the 80s, I knew of him, but when he was around as a active, I guess he's still active. I thought I saw somewhere that he's coming to town soon. But when he was a popular comedian, I guess, or in his heyday, whatever, I was way too young to really be more aware of him than seeing maybe a commercial or something like that was advertising him being there. I think I kind of remember him being parodied on either Looney Tunes or something some kids cartoon show. They did a really G-rated version of him in it. But
I could see maybe Animaniacs or something if you watch that.
Yeah, that might have been it. But his humor never really worked for me. I do like him as an actor that's what it was. He was in that Pam and Tommy show. He was the mobster or whatever that sells the porn. He's been good as that, but him and his Dice character, because I'm pretty sure, I hope that's a character, not just his actual persona, doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, they got into that in this Vice thing. They got into how it was a character and his controversies and, all that good stuff, all the stuff that you would expect for them to cover. The thing,
right.
I've become a bit of a student of all these Dark Side shows that Vice does. It started with Dark Side of the Ring. They went on to Dark Side of the 90s, which I really enjoy. I think that's a really good kind of topic or a subject that there's a lot of things that they could talk about. They went to Dark Side of Football, which I think I told you about last week or a couple weeks ago. I've only watched like an episode of that, so I really haven't. I can't make commentary on how that is yet, but that just seems like they're going to run out of topics. I just don't. Like, the second episode's like about Bill Belichick, like the dark side of Bill Belichick or something. Like, I mean, is this?
I think Bill Belichick is the dark side.
Yeah, I don't think he's hiding too much. And then with this dark side of comedy, so the wrestling one, they always show. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure you have, right?
I haven't seen them all, but I've seen a bunch of them.
You know enough about it to say this is what
when they were doing the like Guatemalan like backstreet wrestling and stuff, or weird random ones like that, I kind of lost interest in those because I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on in this.
Guatemalan backstreet wrestling. We need to do an episode of this show about that. But so they film everything.
Sounds like something we would do.
Yeah, they film everything in silhouette or slightly out of focus. You can't ever see anybody's face. They look like reasonable facsimiles of the people they're supposed to be representing. Then with Dark Side of the 90s, they show a lot of, because it's the 90s, they have a lot of footage, but they put in these little reenactments and whatnot. And on this comedy one, they don't blur the people at all. So if they don't look like the people, I mean, they look similar, I guess. But like the Dice, the guy that they got to play Dice, doesn't really look like him. His hair is kind of similar, but he's leaner. The Chris Farley,
they just went around the office and said, like,
"You look like
that. That would do.
That could pass." And the Chris Farley one is all the people from SNL that they have representing the real people from SNL look nothing like it, so it's really laughable. But yeah, so
Chris Rock's a white guy all of a sudden.
Almost. I mean, not quite that severe, but yeah, they just don't. It doesn't. It's just. I think they're kind of grasping at things because Dark Side of the Ring was so popular. I'm sure Dark Side of the 90s does pretty good for their network. I don't know how football did. Probably not super great, but it's funny to see the evolution of how this is going for them.
I would think football would still be at a point where the stories that you would want to hear, they're not quite at the point where they're able to talk about yet. Because you'd want to hear about the CTE stuff and I don't know, maybe this is on there, but like some of the Dicta stories and stuff like that. And it just seems like football is so like, what's their protect the shield and all that shit that they always do. I feel like they would just stop any like really negative story from coming out unless it didn't involve in any way, shape, or form American football or the NFL.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see the Ray Rice story anytime soon. They're so protective of the workings of how things go, like suspensions and people that have gotten into trouble. They try to cover that up so much. So yeah, I think that you're just going to get the really popular stories. The thing about this Andrew Dice Clay thing that I found really interesting is they had the WTF with Mark Maron interview. They had pieces of that in it. They had pieces of, they really talked a lot about Nora Dunn refusing to do SNL when he was on with Sinead O'Connor, who refused to perform. And they really get into that. And they spend, I would say, at least a third of the episode talking about Nora Dunn. It's like, why don't they just have their own Nora Dunn episode? It's interesting. But yeah, other than that, I don't really, there wasn't anything really new or noteworthy that I've been kind of peeping on. How about you?
I watch some football stuff too. I'm caught up on Hard Knocks, which I don't know if you're caught up on that or not. Is it just me, or does it seem like they're really not focusing in like, it seems like I remember Hard Knocks from being like a really good, like behind the scenes show, but there was always a lot of like heartbreak and seeing guys like dreams crushed and people just like having their lives kind of railroaded and ruined by like getting cut from the Lions.
Railroaded. Yeah. I do think that it's a little different, I think, this week because they haven't done any cuts on the show yet. I think with this next episode, they'll be doing cuts, but
it's only like 5.
And I do kind of get that vibe that it's not been the same as it's been in years past. Like it doesn't seem like
they're spending so much time on the coaches.
Yeah,
as opposed
exactly.
To
as the players. Yeah. Usually they go so much in the personalities of the players. In this, they have focused on a couple people like Jamal Williams. They talk to a lot. Like DeAndre Swift, they have not even shown since week 1, like the first week of the show.
Aside from him walking around like in the facility here and there, I don't think I've seen Hawkinson at all.
Oh yeah, he was on like the second episode where Campbell's talking about his shorts.
Thing. Yeah, but aside from that, I don't think I've seen him. I mean, you see him like a little bit again wandering around the background or something, but you're not getting to know him or anything like that.
Yeah,
So,
it's totally big time focusing in on Aiden Hutchinson, which, I mean, he was a first rounder, right? What, second pick overall?
sure.
So that makes sense.
And local kid and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, he's got
So
enough local interest, but no Jared
Sure.
Goff, which I'm sure you're happy about.
I'm fine with that. He's fucking goober, so I'm fine with that. But he's also been on that show twice, I think, already. They probably look at it and say, do we really need to have another season with Jared Goff being the focal point of the show?
Yeah, I'd agree.
But on the other hand, they decided to go to Detroit to do it, where they would have known Jared Goff was there. So,
Well, I don't know if you've heard why they picked Detroit.
I would assume it's because of the coaching staff, because they seem to really like the coaching staff.
Well, I guess.
And I mean, they're very watchable, for lack of better wording. Like, they're the one thing true Hard Knocks does really well is it does make you kind of like, yeah, I really do want to like root for this team. And I'm still watching it with like Lions glasses on, saying you're still going to be like 4-13. How many games are there? 17 games? Yeah, so 4-13 or 5-12. What, you're going to suck. There's a reason why like no one knows any of these guys that you're focusing on. It's because you have no really good players. But it's still an entertaining show. It's an engaging show. It kind of makes you want to go do some, well, maybe do like light exercise as opposed to like hard exercise in the heat.
as opposed to some Hard Knocks.
Right. But
So what they said
I don't know.
is they have these rules about Hard Knocks, like who they will film, and I think it's like you can't be on, the team can't be on if they've been on in the last so many years. They have to have like,
can't have a new coach.
I think, yeah, you can't have a new coach. I think you can't have just won the Super Bowl. There's like all these different stipulations, and all the stipulations wrapped together, there were 3 teams to pick from. And the Lions were like, yeah, please do this, like come and film us. It's been entertaining. I mean, it's great because they're hometown team for us, but it also sheds a light on some of these guys, and they do make them, they have a really good knack. Hard Knocks has a really good knack of making teams that may not be competitive at all, or just maybe be on the brink of being competitive, be compelling. Like when they did the Bengals were probably a little
They
bit,
were like 6-10 that year or something like that.
like
They weren't
getting
very
towards
good.
the bubble. And they had good players though. They were just starting to get some good players, and some of those players still stick around, which is really weird, but that was a long time ago, it feels like.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. After the current season, like past seasons tend to blend together for me on that show, but it's still one of those, it makes you feel kind of like the season's like changing. It's almost like a good lead into the Halloween season for me. I enjoy that one. Then I caught there's some Tom Sweeney documentary on Tubi, which it's only like an hour and a half long, but with the ads, it came out to like 2 hours long. But it's a lot of Tom Sweeney talking about Tom Sweeney, but mildly interesting. I would have liked to seen it be more of like a, let's just break down how you did X effect and kind of show the magic behind it. But it's a lot of like, well, I was this kind of kid and my dad was a hardworking guy and then he died. And, I was an adult then. And, oh yeah, I went to Nam. And it's like, that's interesting. And I'm glad that Tom Sweeney's had this storied life and seems happy now, but I don't know if I needed to spend a whole hour and a half watching that.
Yeah, I would think it would be more entertaining if you see how some of the movies that he's done, some of the effects, stuff like you said, but I think that they also, I don't know, they want to probably try and humanize him a little bit.
Well, and they did, and they do show a little bit of some of the effects. Like there's obviously like him working with Romero is like a huge part of it. And then they make a big deal out of, can't think of his name now, the monster that he does in Creepshow, Fluffy. They make a big deal out of that because he was trying to go away from just spraying blood all over the place and wanted to make a giant prosthetic thing. And then it's like after Creepshow, they just kind of jam the last 40 years of his career into the last 20 minutes of this kind of rap mixed with the last however many years of his personal life, and they're all at the same time. I don't know. If you really like Tom Sweeney and if you listen to the show, there's a good chance that you do. It might be worth giving a try. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's also not going to win any awards for documentary of the year or anything like that from 2016 or whenever it came out. So
they're going to retro reward it.
Yeah.
Retrofit it
Yeah.
with an award.
But yeah, past that, I mean, it's just been kind of typical around the house, work and shit week. Nothing too crazy. But what can you say? It is, however, Miller time. So this week we are talking about a movie called Night of the Creeps. I really like, sometimes you really get like a really good synopsis because you can tell it's written by a person as opposed to someone who's actually like, well, I guess any synopsis would be written by a person, but written by some person who doesn't write very often. The synopsis on this movie on IMDb right now is 2 sentences. One's kind of a run-on sentence. Alien brain-eating parasites entering humans through the mouth turn their hosts into killing zombie. Not zombies, zombie. Some teenagers start to fight against them.
That's almost like a haiku. You could probably split that up into a really nice haiku if you just edited it a few words here and there.
Aren't these college kids? Shouldn't they be? Well, I guess maybe they're teenagers, but I got the impression they were a little older than that.
I would probably say late teen. I mean, Jason Lively, is that his name?
Yeah.
I mean, Jason Lively he just looks young. I mean, at this point in his career.
Yeah, he does. Actually, there's a good chunk of this movie where I got some major Weird Science vibes watching it this time. Like, it's kind of a mix-up with, like, there's points where it feels like a mashup of Animal House, Weird Science, and, like, a goofy zombie movie for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I was thinking about this movie, I've seen this a few times, and when I watched it this time, it really struck me that they have, like, 2 very distinct parts of the movie. I mean, there's different storylines, but it feels like different storylines for different characters, but it feels like the movie is like there's this teen or young adult college kind of movie, and then we have the zombie movie and the alien movie. It's really weird. There's a really clear delineation from when it goes from one to the other.
See, and I almost feel like because of the little 50s montage in there in the middle, it goes from like alien movie to like weird 50s monster movie right into like exactly what the rest of the movie, like 80s creature feature. Do you want to give a better synopsis of this other than bad pluralization and like detail so we can kind of kick off at a better starting point with
generally when you say someone doesn't write very often, that means they don't write very well. That's what I pick up when you say something like that. When you said, you can tell this person didn't write very often. So the nutshell, the elevator pitch of this movie, I'm the worst person to give an elevator pitch because I've already spent 30 seconds leading up to my pitch for an elevator pitch. But the movie is about, it starts in 1959. There's college kids. They're hooking up and a meteorite comes crashing down or something from the sky, from space. The man of the man-girl, Jesus Christ, the guy, geez, man, the guy of the guy-girl relationship goes, he's
man-girl,
the man-girl the relationship guy. He's hell-bent on going to check out this meteor or whatever fell from the sky. He goes, he sees this little slimy thing, it pops out and it goes in his mouth. We go fast forward to the present day, 1988, 1989. What year is this from? Is it 90? 88?
You're missing a big plot point there, but I don't know if you did it on purpose.
Oh, of the police, the guy,
the hero with the hero with the story.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. So right. Fast forward to 1989, 80. What? God damn it! What year? 86.
I think it's 86.
Why the hell don't they just do 40 years later? All right, let me get back to that. Fast forward.
We're testing your math.
Yeah. Oh shit. Bad idea. Fast forward to 1980. Geez, I almost said 1989 again. 1986. And we got the 2 college dorks. They're trying to find, trying to get laid, basically. It's like a little bit of a horny teenager kind of situation. And dorks want to try and get in this fraternity because that's how they're going to get this girl that Jason Lively, the lead character Chris. In this movie. Chris, yep. Chris is interested in this girl. She's a sorority chick. He figures the only way he'd have a chance is if he joins this fraternity. He goes to the fraternity head and says, hey, we want to rush. What do we have to do to get in this fraternity? Vinton from Mama's Family says, actually not Vinton, Bubba from Mama's Family says, you got to go to the morgue on campus. What? Okay. And go get a body and go dump it on this rival fraternity's front door and you'll be in. And they're just totally pulling their chain. They just want him to do something. They're not going to let him in. I mean, it's kind of obvious. So they go to the lab. They go to the morgue. They find a laboratory. They find this frozen body, which is the guy from 1959. They let him out, unknowingly release this alien slug race thing upon the universe. There's like a little interstitial at the very beginning that tells you that how this thing came crashing down to Earth. We won't get into that. That sets off basically a zombie invasion. Twist, the cop that helps them out, was back in 1959. His girlfriend was murdered by some escape axe murder. I've convoluted this entire story. So you asking me to better synoptize this movie, I did a shit job, but that's what the movie's about. The rest of the movie is fighting alien slugs that are not quite a hive mind, but they infest. I don't know. They turn people into zombies by the slugs jumping in your mouth, and they lay eggs in your brain, and they can control you until your head explodes and more slugs come out.
I think you actually did a pretty good job of summarizing that.
It's hard to really sum it up because there's just so much stuff. There's so many different ideas, and when you actually talk about it, it's a lot more confusing to try and relay everything than just to watch it. Because it feels like it's fairly straightforward. I mean, they do jump around a little bit in time between that 86 and that 59 period, but I don't know. It's just, it's hard to put into words to sum up like that.
It's an interesting movie because, like you, I've seen this movie several times also, and I watched it a couple times this week, and there was one point when I think the first time I watched it this week, I was like, what the fuck happened in this movie again? Like, because there's so much coming at you from so many different angles, and it is a movie that is kind of all over the place, and it opens up several different storylines, and it actually manages to tie up the majority of them by the end of the movie. But while they're going through this roller coaster of plot A, plot B, plot C points, they're also sprinkling in a ton of fan service, like a Disney Plus level amount of fan service you got characters in this movie named, we mentioned the cop that comes back. He's played by Tom Atkins. He's named Ray Cameron after James Cameron. There's cops in the movie named Detective Landis and Detective Ramey. There's another person named Ramiro in this. Like, there's a handful of, I think the love interest, her last name's Carpenter or something like that. Or no, it's not Carpenter. Cronenberg.
Yeah,
is her last name.
Yep.
There is a Carpenter in here somewhere, though. There's a whole bunch of different horror movie directors that all get like heavily name dropped, kind of sprinkled throughout I guess it'd be the second act. It's like right after 1959 when they're kind of introducing who's going to carry the rest of this movie.
Let me ask you a question about that. What did you think about when you realized that all these people have these names?
I think the first one they drop is the Cronenberg name.
Yeah, not a common name.
But yeah, I heard it. I was like, huh. And I didn't really give it a second thought. But then I started hearing the other ones. I'm like, so they just went in. My thought was so they just went and grabbed a bunch of director names and just named characters after them. Okay, that's fine. I wouldn't say like it was something that necessarily excited me or like it's one of those things that's kind of cool because as a guy who likes all that stuff, like, oh, haha, I know that reference and all that. But at the same time, if she had just been Betty Jo Bob, whatever, as opposed to Betty Jo Cronenberg,
Betty Jo
I would have
Bob,
been fine with that too.
I don't know. I found it to be, like you said, it's cool to be in on the joke, but it's also, I just found it kind of hokey. Like, we should mention, this is written and directed by Fred Decker, who did Monster Squad, which we talked about, I don't know, about a month and a half, 2 months ago at this point. So this is his first movie he directed, right?
This is it. Yeah, he did this right before Monster Squad, even though there is a little Easter egg in the movie where there's some graffiti on the wall that says "Go Monster Squad," which I thought was kind of fun. I don't know if you caught that.
I don't know if I did. But my point in that is just kind of like, I don't know. It feels like he feels like he's getting away with something. I don't know. It just feels, because, I don't know. There's just something that in my inner like radar says that just seems really hokey. Like, was it necessary?
With this being his first movie, and I remember saying this to you at some point this week, saying that it's a damn shame that Fred Decker didn't make more movies in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a handful of different credits kind of for a whole bunch of different things through multiple genres. But between this and what we got with Monster Squad, and granted, neither of these movies were commercially successful seems like they just never knew how to market his movies. But when I was watching, one of the times when I was watching this, like, if you watch even the opening credits where you're seeing the Famous Monsters font for all the names and everything after the title screen, it almost felt like he had this like thought of, I might not get to make another movie like this, so I'm going to cram as many references in as I can in one movie. And he just kind of went for it because, again, there's so many things, like from all the way at the beginning of this movie right through the end, that it's just like, man, that's a lot like blah, 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 whatever it is that he's referencing.
Yeah. Okay. You've won me over.
One of the other things that's kind of interesting about this movie, once we get into the 80s and out of the 50s, is the color palette that's chosen for this movie. Like, from a cinematic standpoint, it is a very, very bright movie for a zombie movie. Like, the colors are very vibrant. There's a lot of neon rooms. There's a lot of like pinks and purples and stuff that really dominate the screen. Even the blood shots, and there's some pretty intense blood and gore shots in it. It's a very like paint cherry red type blood that you see most often, at least until the very end when they start blowing heads up. I don't know. I had mixed feelings about that. Like, on the one hand, it felt kind of almost like Burton-y as far as the color palette with it. Like, it's just almost too saturated, but it also kind of worked.
Yeah, I think thinking about the time frame, it seems really kind of perfect. It like encapsulates it and really gives you those vibes that this is an 80s movie.
Do you think this movie leans more comedy, or do you think it leans more horror, or is it just kind of walk that horror comedy line really well?
It's a good question. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to really pigeonhole it into either one. I think it does a good job of mixing it pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think the moments of, I think Monster Squad did a better job of that kind of.
Well, Monster Squad
feel.
had a different target audience.
True.
Too,
but I feel like this was, they had, it got kind of serious horror, but there's just these little one-liners that pop up, or there's things that happen, just little, like, when his friend JC, when Chris's friend JC is on the toilet and he's using the bathroom and he's got to reach for like the matches because he sees a slug go across the floor. At this point, they don't know what's going on in the movie. Like, they don't know not
right.
the movie, but they don't know what's going on outside. Nobody knows that these slugs are like the thing that, they don't know what zombies are, number one.
It's the discovery phase of the movie. They're telling you how
And he's trying to light this match and all this stuff. He's reaching for it and the little slug goes by, and it's just, there are these little comedy elements, but I feel like it plays really hard on that comedy edge at the beginning, on that kind of college romp kind of part of the movie. And then when it gets into the horror, they start to rely less on comedy, but more on the one-liners from Tom Atkinson specifically. I mean, this is my favorite movie of his that he's been in. Tom Atkins.
I would agree with that, and that says a lot because we both expressed our love for Halloween 3 before, which he's also in. But he's gone as far to say that this is his favorite movie that he's done. But it's kind of funny because once his character gets reintroduced, it's almost like they flip a switch and it goes from a comedy horror to like an action horror.
Yes.
And Tom Atkins shows up to action movie the shit out of these zombies is basically what happens.
He's here to play Poo Patrol with your nightstick.
Yeah. So that was one of the other things I want to say. Some of the one-liners, especially that they give Tom Atkins through this movie, are on par with the best that you're going to get from Arnold. He's got his catchphrase of "thrill me," which is said I don't know how many times in this movie, but anytime that he's interrogating like a room full of cops, it's just writing. Like, Rob Zombie needs to take writing lessons from Frank Decker, because this is how you write cheesy dialogue and make it work in a movie.
Those are some of the more entertaining scenes because they're not, even the cops up to a point aren't really taking it seriously. The coroner specifically is like, he should have seen whoever before. He just tosses out. I can't remember a specific line that he says, but he brings a lot of kind of comedic elements to these really serious scenes where people have been murdered and they're going to investigate homicides, and the coroner's he's always eating something or he's drinking something or laughing about something.
I love that That's a very 80s movie trope, though. And one you could compare this movie to would probably be Return of the Living Dead, just because it's got that horror zombie comedy element. And it's another one where you have a guy who's either a mortician or works with dead bodies, and they're just shoving a sandwich down their face while they're moving a corpse around. No big deal. What was I going to say? Tom Atkins action movie. I do like watching Tom Atkins interrogate them about the body that disappeared from a crime scene, and no one other than Tom Atkins seems to think that this is a big deal.
Yeah,
they're just like,
happens all the time.
It happens, you know. I do like the in that. I think that's the same scene where you see the dude who's like half dissected walk up the hallway, isn't it?
Oh,
it's right around there.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's this. I saw this movie. I've seen this movie a few times. Then I watched this, I think, on Tuesday, and I almost feel this time watching it, I just kind of felt like I wasn't really feeling it this time. Like I've seen this, like I said, seen this movie a couple times. I've really enjoyed it. And then this time, for some reason, while I didn't dislike it by any means. I just felt like it was one of those scenarios watching it this time where it was a watch checking scenario. Like, how much is left of this? Okay. How far are we? When this plot point hits here, just to kind of jump ahead a little bit, when we get to where everything comes to a head, where the slugs are really multiplying rapidly, they're taking people over. That whole like scenario is maybe 20 minutes from when the shit really hits the fan. Yeah. Until the real, action pieces of the movie with the flamethrower, with Miller time.
It's Miller time.
All that kind of stuff. The busload of the frat guys. Hey, your dates are here. The problem is they're all dead, or whatever he says. It just happens really quick.
It does. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting about this is, once this movie gets to the third act, it's like it downshifts right into third gear, and it takes off to the races. Again, that's where it kind of leads to that. Is this a comedy movie? Is this an action movie? Is this a horror? Like, what kind of movie am I watching here? And I mean, it all works. It does play together pretty well, but there are points where if you're watching this, knowing what's coming with it, it can kind of play off a little repetitive at times. And I did kind of find myself being like, okay, let's get to the point where Tom Atkins starts being kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah.
I don't really care about these guys having girl problems.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of all the melodrama behind Chris and with Brad and with Cynthia. That whole, not really even a love triangle, because Cynthia's not interested in whatever. To get into the weeds, she's not interested. She's interested in Chris. We have the JC factor. I felt like when JC kind of wrote his note, he had known he was infected. He knew how he got infected. He was able to like record a message telling Chris, basically unlocking the puzzle of why all this is happening. I did actually, while melodramatic, I did find it a little bit touching that he would leave this message for him with a note, like making sure that he would listen to the message. But I thought it was kind of weird that Chris just kind of abandons him at the time to take Cynthia home, goes back to the dorm, and doesn't even think like, oh, he was just going to go to the bathroom. Why isn't he back? And doesn't even think about it till the next day.
Well, Chris is kind of a prick up to this point in the movie too,
Yeah.
like in a lot of ways.
True.
But I actually really like that scene with the tape recorder just because it kind of serves two purposes. On the one hand, it gives, three purposes even. It gives JC's character a lot of definition, even though his character is all but done at this point of the movie. It really makes him like a quiet hero of the movie, which is cool. It really kind of like speeds the shit along that you are losing interest in the movie at that point and gets you to what you want to see. So that's nice. And I can't think of another movie, at least not off the top of my head, where they've delivered, this is what the problem is and this is how you deal with it to the characters in that way. And it's a way that really kind of makes sense. Like any real zombie movie, they all know, like, you got bit or whatever. In this case, you got a slug in your ass or mouth or whatever. Yeah. You know how you get to that point, but like to get that whole dialogue of like, you're dead, but you can't feel your brain. I don't have a pulse. I don't have a heartbeat. And it's creepy, and it's kind of it's creepy, but also not scary at the same time.
Yeah.
But it works really good to kind of put a bow on the like, okay, we're moving this movie on to what you came to see at this point.
Between that tape recorder scene and when Chris goes down to find JC, it really underlines the selflessness of that character. He defends Chris. He tries to get him hooked up with Cynthia at the beginning. There's not a whole lot of character development in this movie. There's not a lot of time for it for some of the characters because it's only an hour and a half, and they got to get with like, okay, the alien thing. I think you don't even get to 86. I did it again. You don't even get to 86 for like, I want to say like 15 minutes. And they don't have a lot of time, but they work in, I think JC is one of the better fleshed out characters because they show him, like I said, making those sacrifices, being selfless. He's carrying the tape recorder. I don't know if he carries a tape recorder and records what anybody says. It's not like the Home Alone 2 Talk Boy or anything, but they do show him with the tape recorder. And then they pay it off later with, like we said, with him explaining, hey, I'm giving you the key to how you're going to unlock this problem with these zombie characters. So I really like his character. It sucks that he kind of disappears for obvious reasons about probably halfway into the movie, but I don't really know what else he would have been able to do.
We should mention too, and this kind of speaks to the strength of the character and really the strength of the writing of this story. This is also a character that goes through this whole movie on crutches. So you have a character in a zombie movie that goes through the whole movie on crutches. And yeah, he ends up getting got, but they never make a point of, I mean, they make a point of having the asshole of the movie be an asshole to him because of it, but they never make his crutches the focal point of the movie in a way that it makes him feel like he's less of a person. Where you can take a lot of movies. I mean, the one that comes to my mind like right away is Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the guy in the wheelchair, and they basically make him a kind of an anchor.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say anchor before you said that. He's a total just downer.
Yeah. Well, he's a downer, but he's also a quick off because
what's he gonna do?
He's gonna run away, right? They don't really do that with JC in this movie, though. Like he does kind of get, when he gets, are we using the term infected for this, or I don't know, what, slug
turns,
or whatever?
When he turns, I don't know.
Yeah. It's not like it's a result of his handicap that causes what happens to him to happen.
Right. He's just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. I heard an interview or heard something secondhand with it when we were getting ready for this movie where they said they actually brought up him having crutches. They're like, we just wanted to make a character that was different, but we didn't feel like it was something that needed to be pointed out because you don't really point people out like that. That's not how the world works unless you're an asshole. And the only person that does it is the asshole in the movie. So, right.
Let me reiterate, Bubba from Mama's Family.
Yeah. But I mean, it works. It's kind of a cool thing to see. And it's one of those things that for all the things we like about 80s movies, seeing inclusion isn't always one of those things. So it's kind of nice to see it played off well.
Well, think about the inverse. When we talked about the other Frank Decker movie, Monster Squad, and the language that they use to single out people. It's really weird. It's like night and day different. And maybe it's, college kids are a little bit more refined and they're a little bit more evolved, a little bit more mature. I mean, maybe you could go down that route, but I wouldn't say that's probably very accurate. And then we have kids as the other audience or the other people saying the line. So maybe it's kids will be kids. They don't have a filter. Maybe you could go down that route.
It's interesting too, now that you said that, because again, Monster Squad is a year, maybe 2 years after this. So if anything, it should have gotten more progressive, you would think, but I guess that's not how it works in Frank Deckerverse. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was the year after 86 and 87.
Close.
Yeah, super close.
Yeah. Like I said, when JC gets his, that's where you see it on the wall. They actually have Go Monster Squad written on the wall. So
okay.
You would assume he's either in the progress in the process of writing Monster Squad, or it's got to be an idea at that point.
Oh yeah, if it's actually released the next year, it must be the script's been picked up, all that kind of stuff. Right. I think in that bathroom scene, it would have been a lot freakier, a little scarier, and maybe not necessarily the way that they wanted to portray it, but if the slug, instead of going in his mouth, would have went up his ass, since he is sitting on the toilet.
I kind of got the impression that's what they were going at, because they show go up his pants.
Yeah.
They show one go up his pants. I kind of read between the lines with it, but I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to do, but that's also the only place where they really do it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think they cut before it jumps. His mouth is open. He's on the ground. He's like gasping, and the camera angle jumps towards him. So I don't think we can like concretely say that, if that's even how you use that word, but we can say that it went up his ass, but I just think it would be personally a little bit more terrifying if the slug were to go up his butt.
You're just excited to watch Slither again, aren't you?
Yeah, let's can we kind of hit on Slither a little bit?
Yeah.
So Slither is a movie that uses this whole kind of slug analogy, or not analogy, but device as well. Slugs from outer space come and we'll talk, I think we'll probably talk about Slither pretty soon. But I like Slither a lot. That's one of my favorite horror movies. And I think that
it's definitely one of the better James Gunn movies. Sorry,
he's got
Guardians.
But he's got a few. He's got a few pretty decent movies under his belt.
We've had this conversation before, and I completely agree with you, but I would say Slither is one of the better of his catalog.
I think that Slither it's a bit of it's not a sequel by any means. I feel like it's a little bit of a spiritual successor. It carries along a lot of the ideas. I think Slither almost, it goes that horror comedy route as well. I think Slither might execute the whole thing a little bit better. I think this is like the, I don't know, prototype kind of idea, and then James Gunn takes the idea, or a lot of elements from the idea at least, and makes it, he refines the process, and he puts out the final release, right? He's not releasing the prototype, but he's releasing the go-to-market.
I would agree with that. So anyway, Slither, you were saying?
That was all I had to say about it. Did I have a point? Did I make it sound like I had a point? I didn't.
I thought I interrupted you. I thought you had more to say.
Oh, no.
So another really weird scene in this movie that's kind of right around the time where we're switching gears and going into the third act. How do you feel about the scene with the, I think they call her the house mother in the movie, where they have I guess he's the axe murderer zombie or whatever, the dude that Tom Atkins originally killed when he starts busting through the floor. For me, that is a really weird fucking scene to watch because, okay, granted, they tell you around this time in the movie where the axe murderer guy is buried, and then you find out why he's popping up where he's popping up. But the character in the movie, the house mother or whatever, doesn't know this. And she's just sitting there watching TV with her dog, and she looks over in the corner, and you hear presumably a man with an axe, like a fire axe, trying to bang a hole in the floor. And she just looks over like, huh, that was weird. Goes back to watching TV, and then he does it again, and you see like part of the axe come through. And she still just sits there the whole time as he chops his way up. I'm not quite sure how he gets from the bottom floor to the second floor, because there's not a staircase there, so I guess he climbs up, but whatever.
How does do the slugs burrow underground to activate him? Why does he come up? It's not like every dead person is. They don't show a scene where the slugs are like digging in the ground or burrowing into the ground.
They imply it at the end, because there's like the three of them that come out of Atkins that go into the cemetery. But that was going to be another thing I was going to say. So do these just take over like a live host, or can they just reanimate anything that has a body? Like it's never really explained.
Yeah, if the purpose is to lay eggs in a brain, you would think a guy that's been buried for, like, not in a casket, not sealed, a guy that's been buried in the ground for 30 plus years. Well, not even, my math is shit. 28 years, whatever it is, 27, whatever. For years. His brain's going to be gone. There's nothing to lay eggs in.
Yeah, and again, if someone is chopping through my floor and I'm sitting in the living room just watching TV, at minimum, I'm getting up and saying, like, what the fuck was that?
Not going to put your head on the floor to put your ear to, what's going on there?
I mean, again, maybe you go the shotgun or whatever you happen to have in your house, but especially once you see a fire axe coming through the floor.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just sits there and watches, and this is right around the time, actually, this is the second pet that becomes zombified, which is also bizarre. Does the cat actually shoot any slugs out? I don't remember the cat doing that.
No, I think, I think when you initially see the cat, it's just got the worm crawling out of its eye. And I don't think that it infects the girl at that time. One of the sorority girls has her pet cat, who it's been established that the cat's an outside cat or an indoor-outdoor cat or whatever the term for that is. And
it's a cat.
Yeah, it's infected, and it jumps in her arms, and I think she kind of like throws it or something. And then when Chris and Cynthia are outside, and they're with the flamethrower. They're encountering the zombies. I think the cat is there then. I think, but I'm not sure.
Might be.
I want to just go back to the mother, the house mother thing for a second.
Oh, yeah.
When they show that she's watching a movie on TV, and I don't know what movie that
It's
is.
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, is it? Okay. I thought it would have been really cool because the woman's older and it's black and white footage. I thought for a second that maybe the house mother was the woman on the TV. I thought that would have been a cool callback, but I looked her up. She didn't have any other credits.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't familiar with her, but that was one of the things that I noticed. I'm sure I noticed it before because I kind of have a soft spot for Plan 9 because it's such a bizarre, stupid, great movie.
Got a reputation.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't voted like the worst movie they ever made like several times.
Yeah.
And they did a Seinfeld episode referencing it. So
They never watched Black Devil Doll from Hell. That's all I have to say.
that clip.
Or Evil Times 5 or whatever it is that you keep trying to get me to
Devil
watch.
Times 5.
Devil Times 5.
We're going to watch Devil Times 5. We'll do a live stream of it. It's on YouTube. We could probably get away with
We should do that.
So
We should do that.
absolutely agree. Anyway, this is not a Devil Times 5 podcast yet.
We're renaming the podcast Devil Times 5.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. You have to order new stickers then that no one won.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the house mother is bizarre. That whole scene's bizarre. That's actually where we get to the point where they another mortician that's pulling snacks off of a dead body because they start wheeling her out and actually has a pretty funny line. If we had I think he says something along the lines of, we had to have a different stretcher for every piece of her. We need more stretchers or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And this is where Tom Atkins kind of started. Has he already gone to see our good friend Dick Miller at this point, or is this right before that?
I think it's right before. Yeah, because he goes to the armory, the police armory. Yep. He recruits Spanky, a.k.a. Chris.
Well, before that, he has to go chase down the axe murderer again, and he somehow manages to straight up. You don't see him climb this fence. This is a fence that's probably about 5 feet tall in the back of an alley. As you see him, there's a lot of really good like running shots in this. Like it's very low budget running like chase scenes where it's clear they told the actors to run and they just had the cameraman run right beside him because the camera's bouncing the whole time as they go up an alley, go up the street or whatever. But when they get to the end of this chase where they have zombie axe dude who looks suspiciously like Eddie from the Iron Maiden covers. When they get to the end of the alley, there's like a 5 foot tall chain link fence there, and Atkins straight up just leaps over it like it's nothing. Like he doesn't put his hand on the fence, he doesn't put it like climb it or anything like that. He's just shotgun in hand, up and over, and then proceeds to have this weird like shootout with Eddie from Iron Maiden. This is where the movie starts to kind of wrap, and this is where we get to the rapid fire part of the movie. Like I said, we get Atkins going to visit Dick Miller. We haven't talked about Dick Miller in a while, like since our first episode, have we?
No, I wrote a note about Dick Miller. The last time we talked about him was Chopping Mall. He's the janitor in Chopping Mall.
Yep. And he's in, like you said,
tons of
million
stuff.
things.
Yeah.
And he's just as great in this as he is in anything else.
Yeah. He was like 50 when this movie was made. He died. He was like in his 90s.
Is he? I didn't think he was dead. Is he dead? That's disappointing.
I'm not dead yet. I think he is dead though.
Yeah. He's undead. So after we go visit Dick Miller and basically hold him up in the armory of this police station that happens to have a flamethrower, which I also always found it funny that that's the only thing that he takes is the flamethrower. He doesn't take any other ammunition, guns, anything. Just give me the flamethrower and I'll be on my way.
Hey, they know that the just like the blob previously was averse to cold, the slugs don't like fire. That's the one way to kind of take them out.
They do know that at this point.
Thanks to JC.
And they do have to kind of match one of the posters, so I guess they need the flamethrower.
Yeah.
How do we get back to the sorority house? What's going on there at this point? That's right. This is where the letter comes. Wow, we really jumped all over the fucking place in this movie, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, they go back to the sorority house to rescue the girls, right? Because Cynthia specifically, but that's when
right. Because this is where the bus crashes with the guys whose eyes explode for no apparent reason.
I had to go back and watch that a couple times because I don't know if they explode, but it's like they do this effect where the guys
out or something.
they like bug out to like, I don't know, transition to a bright scene or something. It's really like reminiscent of Large Marge from Pee-wee. Pee-wee's Big
It
Adventure.
made me think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yep.
It's a really weird little scene. It really doesn't serve a huge purpose other than taking a already infected group of sorority, fraternity guys that we already know we don't like, and just kind of expediting their crossover to being dead assholes as opposed to live assholes.
Right. Let's blow this pop stand. We're going to get done, dudes.
Exactly. That's the motto for this show as much as it is for this point of the movie. So basically they crash a bus, and then all of a sudden we have creeps, and it's a race between Tom Atkins, and basically this movie wraps with a race between a bus full of dead idiots and Tom Atkins and Chris going to save the day with the sorority. Why this sorority is the focal point, there is a reason later that we find out, but it's kind of funny that the rest of the town, they're just like, we're gonna go save the girls. Thoughts on the final act and Tom Atkins going into full action movie mode?
It's one of my favorite kind of one-liners. The Miller time.
It's Miller time.
That whole scene is one of my favorite things in horror comedies, everything. I wanted to also kind of mention that I didn't look it up, but I feel like this movie may have had a lot of product placement from Miller, because that's kind of a random thing. And the party at the beginning of the movie is all Miller stuff. They have Miller like cups. They're drinking Miller Lite. There's Miller signs everywhere. It's just a really...
This is also the era of beer brand beer being in like movies all over the place, or like something that looks like Budweiser but says like Beerweiser or something like that.
And I think the thing that I like about it the most, the Miller time comment or the quote or the one-liner, is it just comes out of nowhere. Like, why does he say this other than he's a Miller fan? That's where he blows a zombie's head open and burns it with hairspray and his lit cigarette, the cherry from his cigarette.
Yeah, I'm sure we will probably clip that line into this episode, possibly several times, because it's worthy of it. But if you're unfamiliar with this scene, today is August 26th. I posted this scene earlier today at about 5:00 on all our social sites. Unless one of them decides that it is inappropriate because someone gets shot in the head in the scene and takes it down, you can always go back and watch it there.
We'll put that YouTube clip in the show notes, so if you want to see it for yourself and you haven't seen Night of the Creeps for a while, you can.
Or if you just want to cue it up and watch it again because it's such a great one-liner. But you're absolutely right. It's one of those lines that's so random and so off the wall. It's delivered so well, and it's on par with any Schwarzenegger one-liner, any Stallone one-liner. It's a one-liner to end all one-liners. It's absolutely flawless. It's arguably the best part of the whole fucking movie.
Worth watching the movie just to see this clip that we'll put in the show notes on YouTube that you can watch.
I would still go for that part to say that I kind of agree with that.
Yeah. You want to get to hot dogs here? I feel like
Do we got anything else we want to add on this?
No,
or
I feel like we're
kind of
getting to the, we're like, I don't know. I've been recording for an hour, so we're kind of getting to where we probably need to wrap. So I don't know if you want to throw it to me or.
Okay. How many, so, I mean, there's not a whole lot to kind of tack onto this at this point. Let's kind of wrap on this. Sean, where do you put this on the hot dog scale?
Well, I just want to say, I feel like this episode has been kind of all over the place. It feels like that Chris Farley Saturday Night Live skit where he interviews Paul McCartney. Remember that time? That's kind of how I feel on this. Yeah. But I feel with watching it this time, like I said earlier, watching the movie this time around, a little bit of the bloom fell off the rose for me, I think. It was just kind of, in the past, I really enjoy this movie, but for something this time watching it, like I said, gave me a couple of those kind of look at my watch moments, and you summing up the whole Miller time thing, saying this might be the reason to watch this movie at this point. I kind of have to agree with you. I think for hot dogs, for me, I don't want to give it, this is a good movie, and I feel like if this is something where you haven't, especially if you haven't seen it, and if you haven't seen Slither, I think Slither, like I said earlier, does it better. I think it's the better movie between the two. It's hard not to compare them because the themes are so similar. But for me, I'd want to give this, like, I feel bad about saying this, but I'd want to give it 6.5 hot dogs out of 11 slug-infesting brains, or I don't know, egg-laying slugs, I guess. I do, in the past, I have really enjoyed this movie, but just something this time around just kind of knock some of the shine off of it for me.
That's fair. I look. This is one of the few movies I actually had rated already on IMDb, and I actually kind of agree with where I put it there. For me, I'd say this is a solid 7 hot dogs out of 10 Miller Lights. This movie's fun. It's quotable. It's watchable. It is very much so a period timepiece, and I don't just mean that because it takes different periods and shows them in the movie, but it feels like, much like we said about Monster Squad, it feels like a movie from the 80s, and that can be a very good thing. I do like Frank Decker stuff quite a bit. I like I had said, I really wish he would have done more horror genre type movies as opposed to going on and just kind of writing stuff like whichever the Predator ones that came out in 2018 that was really bad, stuff like that. Yeah. This movie does get a lot right. It does have a lot of really good characters in it. They're really well developed. Again, I love Tom Atkins in this movie, as we mentioned, but the more, especially watching it a couple times this week, I find myself just kind of like, I want to watch the last act, and I'm kind of good on the rest.
Yeah, I do want to say that I feel like they do, again, trying to summarize the movie earlier, it does a good job of pulling all those storylines together, but it's a lot of stuff. When you try to relay what this movie is actually about, it becomes very difficult to verbalize all the different things without confusing the person that you just have to watch it. It's hard to kind of tell somebody what this is about.
Well, it is very much so a movie that is all over the place too, much like this episode. And it's one of those storylines. This might be why it was marketed poorly, because how do you explain what the fuck is going on in this movie? Which, that can be a good thing. There's some movies like that where they can be claimed. Like, if you talk, I think we talked about it before, but if you bring up a movie like Inception, you're just talking, what's the story of Inception? It's a dream within a dream where you go and have fights in a dream.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
But that was I don't remember that got nominated for anything, but it was a critically acclaimed movie. This movie, I think it was received fairly well by critics at the time, but it's a hard movie to kind of pitch and a hard movie to kind of really just kind of narrow down to what the storyline is and try to keep it in line. And even as we demonstrated so flawlessly throughout this episode, as you're going through and trying to talk about this movie, you're realizing, no, that actually came before this, that happened after. The timeline gets all screwed up, just by trying to remember everything that goes through in this movie.
And we just recently saw this.
Right. That's not necessarily like a death knell to it or anything, but it's not necessarily a huge vote of confidence either. And again, if you were to say, watch the 15-second clip of It's Miller Time and he shoots the one zombie in the head, I mean, I might have a good feel for what the high point of this movie is just from that.
Yeah. And just to mention, this movie on IMDb gets a 6.7 out of 10. The Metacritic score is 62 out of 100.
So that's kind of right in range between where we sat. Good. Split the difference. Look at that. We can get something fucking right. As we talk about the 6,521st most popular movie on IMDb.
It's fallen 1,594 spots.
We're back into our comfort zone. Well, we talked about Prey a couple weeks ago, and it was number 1. That was fucking weird. I don't know what we were thinking with that.
Yeah.
So
a little out of character.
Right. You got anything else you want to tack on this one?
No, like I said, I think that if you have not seen this movie, it's worth a watch, but I feel like if you kind of feel like by the end they didn't pay you off by giving you a sequel, because the end does have kind of like sequel bait to it, that you could move on to Slither and probably see a little bit more of a concise story, a revision, let's say.
I would definitely recommend watching this before you see Slither if you haven't seen either, just because it might be one of those movies that's kind of hard to go back to after watching the spiritual successor, I guess we could say, in it. I could easily see if I caught Slither first, which I didn't really have the option. Slither wasn't around till well after I saw this the first time. I could see it kind of coming off like, I don't want to say that it's just trying to be Slither, because obviously that doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I could see myself being like, man, Slither did this a lot better, and this is just kind of hope. So
I could also see someone that saw Night of the Creeps first, and they see Slither, and they think that Slither's ripping it off too. I could see both sides. Yeah,
absolutely. And I could also see people saying that, and not only saying it's ripping it off, but they took the Well, so there's still got that comedy element to it, but it's definitely a whole different, like, it's James Gunn comedy as opposed to Frank Decker comedy,
Right.
which, if you don't know the difference between the two, that's a whole different episode, but there is a difference between the two.
Yes.
But I think that's about all we got on this one, so we're going to wrap it at this point. In the meantime, we would appreciate it if you followed us on all the social stuff. We are at Dewey Pod Monster. I will interact with you. Sean will not, but you can still follow us and I can get messages to him. Sean has socials and stuff to plug too. So Sean, do you want to go ahead and plug your stuff?
Sure. If you're interested in Michigan craft beer, you can find my reviews on such topics at youtube.drafttherapy.com. Like I said, I talked about Michigan beer, taking a bit of a hiatus. But if you're looking for something that's latest on the market, chances are I've probably covered the brewery or maybe even the beer. You can also find me on all the social media outlets at Draft Therapy.
He has not had a Miller Time episode on Draft Therapy.
True.
It's going to have to happen at some point.
I love Miller Lite. It's a shame I didn't do one.
Was that what the pickle beer was, or was that PBR? I don't remember.
I know I did Dos Equis. It was all cheap shit, so it could have been.
Yeah.
Who knows? Cheap stuff.
Yeah. If you're putting a pickle in it, so you're going to ruin it no matter what it is. So,
Or, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
oh. Anyway, we'll be back next week. You guys have a good week. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers. You all right over there?
One down the wrong pipe.
No, I did that earlier, and a coworker thought I was dying. I'm like, no, I'm just a fucking moron who can't drink water.
Right.